Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Dave Crouch. This is Policy Talks, brought to you monthly by the Williamson Inc., our Williamson County Chamber of Commerce. We have a great panel of guests this morning. Just want to thank the WCTV staff and Creed Henderson for getting us on Channel 3 this morning, and Tom Lawrence and the WAKM crew for getting us out on WAKM 950. Our panelists this morning are our Williamson County Legislative Delegation, led by Senate Majority Leader Jack Johnson, our state senator from the 23rd District. Have with us this morning Glenn Cassida, our representative from the 63rd House District, and Sam Whitson from the 65th House District. Gentlemen, we're awfully glad to have you with us this morning, and hope that you can shed some light on what's going on down on Capitol Hill. Jack, you're the senior guy here now. Well, I better not say that with Glenn on, but
I've heard it's great here, Dave.
I'm the oldest.
There you go. So you're all senior. Okay, but tell us a little bit about how the Corona situation has impacted you, and what you're hearing from the district, and just what the impact's going to be personally for our folks.
Well, we've all heard a lot of terms describing what we've gone through, what we're going through from a personal standpoint, a professional standpoint, how it's affected people. The word that is probably the best suited for this situation is unprecedented. We are in uncharted waters right now in so many respects with regards to shutting down our economy, to how our government is functioning, our daily lives, our kids in schools. It's just really everything has been upended. That's the bad news. The good news is hopefully there's a light at the end of the tunnel. We're starting to get our lives back in order. The businesses are opening back up. Slowly, but they are opening back up, and hopefully people will be getting back to work, and we can get this behind us. From a state government standpoint, just to refresh your viewers and listeners' memory, we convened our legislative session as normal in January. This began to happen in early March, and a decision was made to shut down or recess our legislative session, which we did in mid-March. Leading up to that, we passed what we refer to as kind of an emergency budget. It's the one constitutional thing we're required to do every year, is pass a balanced budget. And so we did that, we expedited that and got a budget passed. And then we recessed until June 1st, which of course is Monday. Right. And by the way, that date was somewhat arbitrary. We didn't know how long this thing was going to last back in mid-March. We didn't know when we could safely come back to the Capitol. So we kind of pulled that date out of the air. But in the event that we weren't able to come back, we needed to have a budget passed for the next fiscal year. Our fiscal year ends June 30. So we needed to have a new budget in place. So we did that. Now we are going to resume our session next week. We've already started with committee work. The House committees have been meeting this week. The Senate Finance Committee met yesterday. And then we'll resume with floor sessions on Monday. We can dive deeper into this, and I know my friends in the House will want to chime in on it as well, but we are going to have to redo the budget. That emergency budget we passed back in March it was a very conservative budget. We assumed no growth. Sadly, though, we're going to have to open that back up and do further surgery on the budget. We're going to have to take quite a bit out. We're using rough numbers of about $500 million in the current fiscal year that will end June 30th that we're going to have to get out of the budget or fund, and then about $1 billion shortfall for the coming fiscal year. So absolutely, again, I'll use the word unprecedented, what we're going to have to do. The good news is we were in a very strong fiscal position coming into this, and so we're in a lot better shape than a lot of states, but we're still going to have to make some difficult decisions.
We want to dive into the budget much deeper here in a few minutes, but just everybody in your family is okay, and nothing personally there that is creating issues for the Johnson family?
Other than my 16-year-old broke his leg on Saturday. That's not coronavirus related, but he was horsing around with some of his buddies, as 16-year-olds will do. And and he broke his leg. So he has to have surgery on Monday morning. He's fine, but not a lot of fun for a 16-year-old who's been driving for about 6 months, and it's his right leg. So now he can't drive. So.
Oh, bad news. Bad news. I see we have Representative Brandon Ogles with us this morning. Good morning, Brandon.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you. Glenn, give us an update on your family situation and personal situation, and any close friends and constituents that might be suffering because of what's going on.
No, and thank you, Dave. But everyone in the Cassata household is well. My 4 grown children, my 6 grandchildren, and so we've been blessed not to be ill. Quite honestly, I don't have any friends or any acquaintances even that I know of that have contacted the COVID-19, and so we have quarantined, and it's kept the bug away from everyone on my contacts.
Good deal. Sam Whitson, what about you?
Our family's doing great. They are following the guidelines and staying safe. We have 5 grandkids, and 2 of them down in Alabama and 3 up here. And we get to see them doing a lot of, video, seeing them on the phone there. This Pam and the daughter-in-laws talk constantly all day long about their husbands. And about 2 months ago, the Army sent out an email asking people would they consider coming back or voluntary recall to active duty, and I immediately said yes. And Pam was a little upset at first, but the past 4 weeks she's asked me every morning if I heard from the Army. So I think she's ready for me to go. But we're doing great, and my neighbors are doing great. Paula McCord put out all the flags on Fair Street, and but we see a lot more activity down in Franklin. It's really picked up the downtown area, but Pam's making sure I flatten my curve as much as possible. And we walk every day about 3 miles, and but this has been tough. It's tough on the families, and I just hope people understand this is still an issue out there, and we follow the guidelines established by our governor and our federal government. I think we'll be okay.
That's good. Brandon Ogles represents the district. Brandon, sorry we didn't send you the memo. No ties today, but the rest of us kind of did away with the ties for these Zoom meetings. But, you're in an interesting business. I'm sure everybody understands what you do for a living. How has this situation affected you and your family and your business?
We're definitely, I would say, in a mode of kind of reevaluating and restructuring our outlook for the immediate near future as well as long term, because a majority of my business is actually out of state for large retail chains, some, but mostly restaurant industry. And right now that industry's been pretty hard hit, and we're really looking at the outlooks long term, next 2 to 3 years, on how corporations spend their capital. I think you'll see people kind of pull back. They'll definitely be hoarding cash. Anybody that has reserves will not be spending it on facility improvements. So, my company is going to definitely take some restructuring. Now we're doing some pivoting into the medical field, some more construction locally. We build churches, do other projects like that locally as well. So we'll survive. We were bracing for this. As it's funny sometimes, Jack, because Jack is very optimistic and does a great job and knows the numbers. And a couple times he bent my ear because I was a little worried because things were so good and have been so good for so long. So I was in a standpoint with state government where I was kind of one of the in small group that was pretty fearful and bracing before this happened. So not that I was pessimistic, but I was concerned because I remembered 08, 09 after coming out of a long-term growth and times that were so good where we suddenly pivoted into kind of a crisis mode. Nobody foresaw COVID-19 happening. We never thought we'd have a pandemic by any means, but I was bracing for a slight recession, I would say dip in the economy, but nothing like this, nothing even close to this. So we'll make it. Like many companies, we're just going to work hard and be thankful for what we have and just carry on. But besides that, and I did miss the memo about the tie, but we had a committee that went late last night, and the House is moving pretty aggressively on our committees. So they scheduled me for calendar and rules this morning. So late committee and then back on the Hill this morning to go to calendar and rules because we're pushing stuff to the floor pretty quickly.
All right. Correct me if I mischaracterize what you do. Brandon's in the construction industry. They go into a restaurant and totally, as I understand it, renovate it top to bottom in a 7-day period and have them back in business in a brand new restaurant in a week. I didn't know whether it would speed up or slow down given the economic situation, but it seems like it's slowing.
Well, restaurants are starting to reopen with the social distancing. A lot of people are running at reduced capacity, and unfortunately, restaurants survive on high margin. The profit margins are not like a lot of other industries. They have to do volume. They have to turn tables. They have to have people go through those drive-ins. They have to do a lot of business and do it as quickly as possible. So this social distancing and reduced volume is, these restaurants are reopening, but they're not profitable right now. They're nowhere near that. So until they get to full capacity and turning tables, the restaurant industry is, reduced capacity is a lifeline, but it will not save the industry. They have to get open to full capacity to be profitable.
Right. Jack, what about tackle? Are you all back in business yet?
Not yet. We are hoping to reopen this summer, and we did temporarily suspend operations and a lot of our work at people's homes. Is anyone else experiencing the audio difficulties?
Yeah, we've got an audio problem.
I think it's feedback from Brandon's phone. That's just me. I don't know if we could try muting Brandon when he's not talking.
I've muted Brandon. That seems to be helping. We'll unmute you when we come back to you, Brandon.
But yeah, thanks for asking, Dave. But we're looking forward to getting back up and going sometime this summer.
Good deal. Good. Just your policies, procedures, way of doing business down on the Hill is changing. The Senate side of the building at Cordell Hull is closed to pretty much everyone. Is that correct, Jack?
Yeah, the Senate. What we're doing in the Senate is we've restricted access to the building to staff and members and press only on our floor and in our committee rooms, and then in the Senate chamber. We will meet with members of the public by appointment if necessary. Most of the constituent calls and communications we're able to do either like this through Zoom or by telephone. But if for some reason a constituent needs to meet with me individually, I'm happy to do that in person, and we'll either do that in the district somewhere here in Williamson County, or if they would like to come to the Capitol, they can come to my office by appointment.
Okay, Glenn, Sam, what's the status of the public's access to the House side of the Cordell Hull building?
It is limited, but the public does have access to the House committee meetings. Obviously, a mask is required. You have to enter the building by the Fifth Avenue site, register. But our offices are open, and so's committees with certain restrictions
Right.
on that.
Yes, and Glenn's right. And I noticed this week, even though we had a pretty much full calendar in committee meetings. There just wasn't a lot of people up there. I think people were taking advantage of the General Assembly website to watch it online. And they did a great job in the committee rooms, how they put up barriers, plexiglass between the members and limited seating. And like Glenn said, people are welcome to come up and make an appointment. And for the most part, people are staying pretty safe up there. Feel pretty good about it.
Understand the legislative sessions are going to be somewhat limited in access to those too. And just happened to be at a farm auction Saturday, and was talking to one of your lobbyist friends that happened to be at that auction, and he raised the issue that there might be a constitutional issue with limited access to the legislative sessions. Have any of you all been in discussions about that, or has that been raised among your meetings so far? Jack?
Yeah, we don't believe so. Our attorneys and I believe even in consultation with the Attorney General's office have been looking at that to make sure that what we're doing is constitutional and legal. So different people have differing opinions, but just restricting someone's access to come into the committee room in these we're still in a state of an emergency, right? And we're still under an emergency declaration right now. So when the governor declares a state of emergency, a lot of things can get suspended. We all want it to get back to normal as soon as possible. But Sam mentioned everything we do in committee and everything we do on the floor is live streamed. Anyone can watch it from a computer, from their phone. And again, we will meet with them in person on the Senate side if they would like to make an appointment. So no, we believe we're on very, very strong constitutional and legal footing.
I've yet to see a committee room that was full, that had people out in the lobby that did not get in the meeting. As well as that, there's overflow areas. The committee room 1 and 2 are operational in the House. There's also overflow into 3 and 4 where those are being live streamed. So if people want to come into the building and engage in the House, they've had the ability to do so. So I don't see any grounds for anybody to challenge something that we're doing is unconstitutional. The public's has every ability to view these meetings and to participate.
Good. The governor issued some more guidelines yesterday, and the summer sports, non-contact sports. Jack, you want to give us a rundown, or excuse me, actually Sam is the one that forwarded that to me. Have you got that in front of you, Sam?
Right, that's Executive Order number 38. He put out on the 22nd, and again, it covers summer camps, higher education, and the schools, but also the non-contact sports, how they should do that, and the recommendations of how people stay safe. They're still not allowing contact. For instance, my 2 grandsons play football, and if they practice, they cannot. They can go through the drills, but they just cannot, engage in contact and such. But the other things like volleyball and softball and all that golf has, of course, been opened back up. And the governor's guidance, I encourage people to go to the Tennessee Pledge website, take a look at Executive Order 38, and read that for the details. There's been discussion, about overnight camps this summer. Those are gearing up, and so people are seeking guidance on that too. So I just encourage people to go to the Tennessee Pledge website and also to Google Executive Order 38 for the specific details on that.
All right. This may be tiptoeing over the line a little bit, gentlemen, but are these guidelines or are they laws? Jack, you referred to state of emergency. What the guidelines I read, were guidance, but then it said, but football is not permitted. So what happens if somebody plays football?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there is a fine line. The Tennessee Pledge and the guidance, and it is guidance relative to operating your business safely and opening that up. The governor's made that very clear. These are recommendations for businesses to use. But there are aspects of closure of businesses and things like that do have the full force of law. So bottom line is it's best if you're operating a business to treat those guidelines as if they were law so that you can follow them, not only because it'll probably encourage people to patronize your business and feel like they can do so safely, but it could also help you in the event that you have any type of legal liability. So, and that's something we're working on, not to shift gears, but it's a very important thing we're working on up there is liability protection for businesses. We suspect that there might be some overzealous trial lawyers out there that are wanting to start suing anybody and everybody. And certainly we want to protect the right to sue if you have a legitimate grievance. But if you are a business that is operating and you're substantially compliant with the guidelines as enumerated in the Tennessee Pledge, then you should have some liability protection there. And that's for private sector entities, businesses, as well as governmental entities. So that's a very important bill that we'll be advancing in this abbreviated resumption of our legislative session, is to provide liability protection for state and local and governments, that's city and county governments and school boards, as well as private sector businesses.
Okay, the Senate and House have very different agendas at this point, it seems. And Glenn, you've been behind the scenes on a lot of planning of agendas and that sort of thing. But what if the House has a full agenda, but the Senate chooses not to follow that full agenda? Who wins? How does this resolve itself?
For legislation for a bill to become law, it must pass the House, the Senate, and then signed by the governor. So if the House passes a bill, goes through the committee, goes to the House floor, receives unanimous support or majority support, then on the Senate side, if it doesn't move, then the legislation is stalled. And so if the Senate feels like that they need to just deal with the budget and then adjourn for the year, the things we pass in the House will be for naught.
Okay. I suspected that, but nobody's ever really said that. Jack, have you heard of any hard, fast thoughts about adjournment, when you're going to adjourn, what that schedule might look like?
Well, we don't want to be up there any longer than absolutely necessary. And you know, the House and the Senate are on somewhat different paths, but that's not unnormal. We're a bicameral legislature. That's the way it is in a normal legislative session. I mean, there are bills that advance in one chamber and not the other, and vice versa. I think when the dust all settles, we'll probably end up closer than it might otherwise appear. The Senate has passed, I think, somewhere around 80 to 90 bills that have not passed the House. And so the House certainly, if they choose to do so, can take up those bills. We've already passed them, and so they can get them through committee and to the floor and get them passed and then on to the governor. So the House chose a tactic. It's not a wrong tactic. It's just different than the Senate to basically kind of just resume where they were back when we recessed. The Senate is kind of coming at it from the other direction and saying, what is absolutely necessary that we take up and that we deal with. Obviously, the budget is the biggest and most important. Both House and Senate agree on that. And so the House can work on bills that had already passed the Senate. And then there are about 35 bills that the Senate has identified that we think are mission critical. They either deal with economic recovery, they deal with the budget, or they deal with mitigation of COVID-19. And the House is likely to move forward on most of those bills as well. So when the dust all settles, the House may end up passing some bills that don't get taken up in the Senate. And as we prepare to adjourn, we'll get together with the House, as we do every year and every session, and take a look at those items, and we may end up moving forward on some of those as well. So I think it'll be fine. With just different tactics, different ways of approaching this resumption of our session.
Brandon, do you have any insights on how that all might play out?
Well, and I want to echo a lot of what Jack said, and Jack's been great to work with, and he's I love having him as a senator, and I believe every bill that I have left calendared, with the exception of one, Jack is carrying in the Senate. So we met yesterday, and we had a little powwow, and I voiced some of my concerns because, in the House, unfortunately, we do have a lot of legislation that we were not dependent on, but we've invested hundreds and thousands of hours of labor into and time away from family to move, working with different departments of state, and there is a fear in the House that a lot of this is all for naught, and that legislation that's very important to the people of Tennessee will not move forward. So in a lot of ways, I am panicked, but I love my senator, and Jack does a great job. And he kind of calmed me down yesterday, and I was pretty fired up. But as he does, he helped me understand this process a little better because I'm still new at this. But I hope we can definitely get to an agreement and get a little bit closer to where we're at. Jack have a piece of legislation that we'll have to work on together. That helps protect Tennessee businesses. So we're working on that as well, from some online retail and some structuring of how we collect revenue. But we'll work through this, and at the end, we'll definitely try to do what's best for the state and the people of Tennessee.
I'm sure that that's the case for sure. Apologize to the House gentleman here, but Jack, you've been involved in some pretty intimate discussions about the budget, but about the state of the revenues coming into the state. And I know there's been the governor's, I believe they call it the state funding board governor, and his top finance officials met, I believe it was Wednesday, and then your finance committee met yesterday. Tell us what the latest, and one thing I thought was interesting about the state funding board is they had 4 different economists there that all had much different projections. So whose projections are you going to use, and which ones do you believe?
Well, it's kind of like the old joke about lawyers. If you need a legal opinion, you ask 3 lawyers, you'll get 5 opinions. It can be the same way with economists sometimes. So, without going too far into the weeds, to remind folks, the way our state budget works is we do base our budget on projected revenues. So, the funding board, which you mentioned, which is made up of the governor, constitutional officers, they meet, they look at the state of our economy, and they make a projection for the coming fiscal year. And they say, we anticipate that revenue, which is largely sales tax in Tennessee, there are other forms, but let's just use sales tax. We think that our economy will grow at X%, 2%, 3%, 4%, whatever it might be. And so our sales tax revenue collections will grow. So they give us a range. They say we anticipate revenue growth or decline. And now we're talking about revenue decline, right? But normally it's revenue growth in normal times. And they give us a range. And then the General Assembly then takes that range and we pick a number. And we typically are very conservative. If they give us a range of 2.5% to 3.75%, then we might go in and project at about 3, right? Somewhere in the middle there is what we try to use. And then we pass a budget based on those revenue projections. And then we have to balance it. And that's the predicament we're in for the current fiscal year, which again runs from July 1 through June 30. So this all happened in mid-March. So our 4th quarter, which is April, May, June of the current fiscal year, is decimated. And literally our revenue, one of the estimates that was in there for our sales tax collections in this fourth quarter are down 41%. 41% for this quarter. So, so looking ahead to the next fiscal year, you're right. The revenue, the decline in revenue, the projected decline in revenue ranged anywhere from around 500 million to about 1.5 billion is what they anticipate that our revenue loss will be for the coming fiscal year. So we're using a working number right now of about 1 billion. That's about in the middle of those economic projections from those economists. And then for the current fiscal year, the estimate for the loss in this fourth quarter is anywhere from around 230 million to about 750 million. And so we're using a projected loss for the current fiscal year of about 500 million. So what that means is
let me interrupt there just a minute. But Bill Fox, the economist from the University of Tennessee, I think in the governor's state funding board meeting, he actually projected an increase in revenues for the current fiscal year. But you're saying there's a huge shortfall. Is that
right? So, and again, because we were almost 3 quarters into this current fiscal year, and then this all happened in the fourth, we had carryover excess revenue from the previous fiscal year, or that had been over collected through the current fiscal year, I should say. And that's that 350 million that we socked into the rainy day fund, hoping that we wouldn't have to spend that. We're going to have to use that $350 million for the current fiscal year to help us balance the current fiscal year. Because again, we base the budget that we're on right now on projections, and we certainly didn't project a decimated fourth quarter. So we have to close the books on the current fiscal year, and we have to use reserves. We've obviously already implemented, the governor has hiring freezes, spending freezes, all the common sense things that you would do in a business budget or your family budget when you have a crisis to help us mitigate the impact on the current fiscal year. So we got to get it buttoned up without a deficit, because we're not allowed to have a revenue deficit by the Constitution. And then we've got to revise the budget for the coming fiscal year and take about $1 billion out from what we had previously.
You mentioned that we're not allowed to have a deficit, but in this morning's Tennessean, the governor's actually discussing a deficit for a couple of years. But
let me explain it
by balance.
Let me explain that, because what he's referring to is using one-time money for recurring expenses. That we're allowed to do that. We can do that. We don't like doing it, and historically we don't do that. If we have a recurring expense, we fund it with recurring dollars. That's where a lot of these states like California, Illinois, and New Jersey get in a lot of trouble, is they're funding recurring expenses with one-time money. That's like getting, a $5,000 inheritance from your Aunt Edna when she passes away, and you go out and commit yourself to a $5,000 annual expense into perpetuity. It doesn't make a lot of sense. What the governor's talking about is, because of this crisis and what it's done to our economy, we are going to have to stopgap fund some of our government, even some recurring expenses, with one-time money for a couple of years, but we're putting a plan in place. By the third year out, we're back to a structurally balanced budget, which means we're funding recurring expenses with recurring revenue, and we're using one-time money for one-time expenses. So that's that deficit. And we had a fairly lengthy conversation about that in our finance committee. So we will be constitutionally balanced. We're not borrowing money to fund recurring expenses, but we may have to use some savings account money in the short term to fund some of those revenue expenses. That's the deficit. It's a recurring versus non-recurring expenditure.
Brandon, does the House see it the same way? Is that your understanding over on the Senate?
Yes, Jack, as always, did an excellent job explaining that, and he puts things in common sense where people can understand it, and I think that's exactly right. And we were so fortunate to have conservative leadership like Jack and Glenn and the governor. If you'll recall, our rainy day fund was really under attack even by the Tennessean, as excess money and us being hoarding and greedy and all that. We were called all that before this crisis hit. And that rainy day money is really going to be the lifeline for sustaining some of the services in this state for the next couple of years, so government can operate here. So very thankful for the leadership that was here for years, including Charles Sargent, that put measures in place so we would weather the storm.
Hey, Dave, could I come in real quick?
Go ahead, Glenn. Yes.
I tell you what I'm most proud about is the conservative leadership that we have from the governor, Jack, and on, is that we're cutting. We're not going to raise taxes in a time when the economy is down, when families are suffering, businesses are suffering financially. The state of Tennessee is not, there's no move to raise taxes. And our Democratic colleagues had a meeting just a couple of days ago, and that was their solution, was to raise various and sundry taxes. And I personally, and I know my peers here, feel like that's just the wrong way to go.
Okay. That was a concern I had, and thanks for bringing that up, Glenn. Matt Largen just sent me a text, and he is concerned, or there is a concern out there about economic development funds drying up that might impact some of the decisions that, in particular, manufacturers have about relocating to the state of Tennessee. Has there been any discussion about those funds at all so far?
Unfortunately, and Jack can jump into that a little bit deeper, but I think everybody is going to have to brace for deep cuts. I know a memo went out. Every state department's been asked for a 12% to submit a 12% reduction. It's going to be hard on everybody. So unfortunately, I think ECD money will be cut, as all departments will have to do what they can to get through the next couple of years. But that's so we can keep the vital departments running. You know, those services that people are so dependent on the state government, you know, those have to stay intact. Our law enforcement has to be funded. Our, you know, state crime lab guy has to operate. I mean, it's going to be hard on everybody. And unfortunately, I think ECD will take a hit. And they've been contributing so much to this state. And the growth, and we're so thankful for that. Jack, or Glenn, whoever, I don't know. It's unfortunate, and I'm so sorry, and we're all sorry that we're having to deal with this.
Any more color there, Jack? Glenn?
Yeah. So Brandon is exactly right. Nothing is sacred. Everything is on the table right now. And Brandon made a good point about, you know, the critical essential services of government, things like schools. We're committed to fully funding our BEP formula throughout this. So our schools will be fully funded. There's no talk now. There's no talk now about any state employee layoffs or furloughs. You know, we're probably not going to be able to give state employees or teachers the raises that we had hoped to be able to give them.
Thank you.
But there's no talk of state employees, you know, losing their job. On the ECD economic development standpoint, Matt brings up a great point as always. Here's the good news. Yes, we may not have the number of dollars that we would have otherwise had for economic development, but I'll tell you this: if I'm a business owner and I'm looking at a state to relocate in, I'm still looking at Tennessee because of all the other reasons, our economic climate, the way it was before this and the way it will be afterwards. Tennessee is still going to be very, very competitive when you're looking at other states. You know, you're looking at California, New York. New York's looking at a $15 to $20 billion deficit. That's an operating deficit. We have a balanced budget. We've got money in our savings account. We will after this, and we still have AAA credit rating. So Tennessee is still going to be very competitive. So yes, some of our ECD dollars will be diverted, will have to be diverted. Not all of them, but some of them will have to be diverted just to balance our budget. But Tennessee and Williamson County will still be very competitive from an economic development standpoint.
Now you said nothing is sacred. But the governor's voucher program, if there's anything sacred up there, that would probably be it. How is that going to be looked at, and what will the results be as you see them, Jack?
Well, so again, with the ESA implementation, the governor's authorized to enact or put in place the ESA program to allow these kids that are trapped in failing schools to have an opportunity for a decent education. And it pains me greatly that might be delayed for a year, because that's another year that these kids are going to be denied a quality education when they're otherwise zoned for these failing schools. But a critical component of that legislation was to backfill for those schools in Davidson and Shelby counties the money that would follow the child. So just to refresh everyone's memory, the way that program works, if you're in a failing school, you do get to take the state appropriation for that child's education and use that money to send the child to a different school. But the school that the kid was otherwise zoned for was still going to get the money, the state appropriation from the BEP. And so that's where the expense comes in. So I find it very interesting from some of my friends out there who are so adamantly opposed to kids getting a quality education and insisting that they be trapped in these failing schools, that they don't want those schools to get the backfill money so they can try to improve those schools. But having said all that, I think it's unlikely that that money will be in the budget for the coming year. So we'll probably have to wait on the implementation for another year. But let me again stress how painful and sad that is, that for another year, these kids will be denied a quality education.
Glenn, I know you worked very hard on that bill. Any comments?
No, Jack just said it well, is that if we do cut it, if we do take it, it's money that was going to schools, Nashville, Memphis, to keep them whole. So the program itself, it's just allowing students to take their tax dollars and put it to work for them or their school of choice. And so any cuts that come will come to the public schools in Nashville and in Memphis.
Sam, you mentioned that you'd checked on Mac Hatcher. How is all this going to affect the transportation projects and the one that's so near and dear to our hearts here in Franklin?
It will have absolutely no impact on our Mac Hatcher construction. In fact, that's moving right along and still on schedule to be completed late next summer. In fact, anytime TDOT lets a contract and they start moving dirt, that is a done deal. You don't cancel contracts on projects. And for instance, in Mac Hatcher, they've already moved 220,000 cubic yards of dirt out of the 270,000 they need to. So that project's well on its way. And so the other projects, the Tennessee Highway, the highway fund's a little different than other funds. They just cannot come out and take that money and use it in the general fund unless two things happen: that we as a legislator, General Assembly, passes an appropriation act, and two, we have to change the law to allow that money to be taken out of the highway fund. And I just don't see that happen. The highway fund is really a user's fee, because it's generated by gas tax, diesel, and registration for the most part. And TDOT let, I think, over $1.2 billion worth of projects last year, and they already started environmental work on the US 31 Columbia Pike from all the way from Duplex Road up to 840. So they're starting the studies on that, and also the I-65 interchange at Buckner Road and Spring Hill. They've had a short list of contractors that made the cut, and then they will start letting those bids hopefully here later on this summer, and then construction starting hopefully next year on that. They still have to do right of way and some environmental studies, but like for instance, this has also given us an opportunity to fix our highways with the less travel in there. TDOT reports with the less number of cars on the road, they've been able to do a lot more resurfacing, paving, and projects to improve safety and the maintenance of the roads.
I would have expected, Sam, that gas tax collections are down, though.
Yeah, they report for the past 2 months. So basically they're taking a cut on that, but they do not anticipate with the money that we do have in the highway fund, any, really impact on our construction projects. Now, those projects, let's say, for instance, we have a $100 million project plan in a couple of years that money has not been allocated to yet, and that money may not be there. They may be able to take that plan, kick it down the road a little bit, but do 4 projects for $20 million and take, and adjust that to make up for that shortfall. But TDOT, again, and like I was saying, with the reduced number of cars on the road, the 440 project is actually accelerated. And I'm also happy to report the bridge on the McAdger project. They'll be pouring concrete here next week or so. And for everybody's information, that will be the longest bridge in Williamson County when it's done.
Now I think Governor Bredesen, he robbed the gas tax fund to balance the state budget several years ago. Glenn, you were probably around at that time.
I was.
No
And we
discussion
paid it
about
back.
that.
I don't see Governor Lee or the leadership in the House or the Senate supporting that at all. I think the state of Tennessee was put off with the legislature and the governor for doing that, and I don't think you'll see that again.
Jack, I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, no, hands off the road fund. We're not going to do that again. In fact, we passed legislation. Sam referenced this. He's exactly right. We passed legislation actually prohibiting that, diverting money from the road fund. Now, let me be clear though, we do have numerous reserve accounts in various departments and state agencies that we may tap into across state government, but these are surplus revenues, basically reserve accounts that different agencies and departments have. But the road fund is unique. As Sam said, it is a user fee. It's dedicated to road projects. When we passed the Improve Act, we made sure that not only did we repay everything that was taken from the road fund by the Bredesen administration, all of that has been repaid before we passed the Improve Act. And again, we've got legislation for us to divert money from the road fund to the general fund. We would have to basically change the legislation, the law on the books now that says you can't do that. And there is no appetite or will whatsoever to do that. It will not happen.
Brandon, you're involved in the negotiations on the House side. Any changes you see coming that we hadn't talked about?
I think you covered it. I mean, the biggest, and you hit it earlier, the biggest, I think, hurdle we have to overcome is just the huge deficit, and how literally this week I'm rewriting a lot of legislation and having to amend bills because we went from some of the best times the state has ever seen, and now we're in the midst of numbers we haven't seen since Reconstruction. So anything with a fiscal note is just not an option. So we're trying to salvage what legislation we can to help Tennesseans without a fiscal note or greatly reduced fiscal note, and still do the work we were elected to do. Not everything we do up here costs things, but most good things cost something. So we're just trying to, what we can't pay with dollars, we're trying to put sweat and hard work in and see what we can do inside departments to absorb costs where we can, and just reduce fiscal notes.
That sounds like we're just going to work our way through it, and in the end, everything will be okay. But going to be a lot of discussions about how to balance all the various aspects of state government. What about the elections, gentlemen? We've got an election coming up in August, another one, of course, the presidential election in November. Are we going to see any changes there? What will be the differences that we might see this fall, this summer and fall there? Sam?
Well, first of all, I wanted to say, I support the Senate's approach on this crisis that we're facing, and I've expressed that to my House leadership. The Senate has identified what's important to our state. I thought I had some really great bills, but looking at them, they can wait for a year till we come back. And I expressed that to Jack, that I appreciate their leadership on this, that let's take care of the people's business, the important business, and get through this. But there's also another impact on the election, especially on the House side. We have to run every 2 years, and my colleagues who have primary elections, the longer we're up there, the shorter time frame they have to campaign, fundraise. So until we adjourn, if we're up there for another month, they have about a month left to campaign, and that has an impact on several of our members. And so that's why I've expressed to our leadership on the House side, let's do our business, get out there and let folks come out there and get a chance to meet the people in campaign. And hopefully we can get out there as soon as possible to do that, but also pass those bills that are critical to the people of Tennessee at the same time.
Dave, the focus in August in Williamson County will be the replacement for Senator Alexander. And so Senator Alexander has served our state well, from governor to secretary of education to now U.S. senator. And so that'll be about the only thing on the August ballot is selecting his replacement in the Republican primary.
Jack, any changes you see coming there as far as you mentioned last time that anyone over the age of 60 could request an absentee ballot. Anything else there that the coronavirus might change?
Yeah, our Secretary of State, Trey Hargett, our Coordinator of Elections, Mark Goins are working very hard on this with our county election officials. And of course, we've got a great county election commission here and a great election administrator here in Williamson County. And I know they're working hard on that. Several things that you have to take into consideration. One is I was told the average age of a poll worker in the state of Tennessee is 68. And so, you're talking about the more vulnerable population there relative to COVID-19. And so we need to think about poll workers. A lot of folks who commit to doing that every time we have an election and volunteer their time and work those polls and make sure our elections run smoothly. A lot of those folks are not going to want to do that because they don't want to be exposed to the coronavirus. So we're looking at that and making sure that our Secretary of State and Coordinator of Elections and local election officials have the resources and tools they need to make sure that they have polling places. We're probably going to have to spread some things out, voting machines, and make sure that they can adequately implement social distancing. May have to look at additional polling sites. So we want to make sure that our elections go smoothly and we've got the appropriate number of people there to work those elections. So yeah, there's going to be some challenges, but the folks who do that are working hard on that and planning for it. And then certainly we, my House colleagues and I are standing by at the ready if there is any legislation that needs to be addressed to make sure they have the tools they need. Interestingly, right now, I don't believe we're going to need to take up any additional legislation. I believe that the Secretary of State is comfortable that he has the authority to implement whatever is necessary to be able to accommodate people when we go to vote. We just don't want people to be afraid to go vote. It's important that everybody go vote and feel comfortable doing that. And again, if you are over the age of 60, you can request an absentee ballot for any reason. If you're under the age of 60 and you are sick or you're disabled or for some reason cannot make it to the polling place, you can also request an absentee ballot. What we're not going to do in Tennessee, and you're hearing some talk about this at the federal level, we're not going to go to across the board mail-in ballots. There's example after example of how complicated that is. We're not equipped to do that in Tennessee. We don't have the appropriate technology in place to allow everyone to do a mail-in ballot. And so we're not going to go down that path in Tennessee, but certainly those who need an absentee ballot will be able to get one.
Well, I'm sure by next election cycle, we'll be voting by Zoom probably, but.
Hey, Dave. Also, we made one change before we adjourned. It should help. If people remember, if they voted in the past year in Williamson County, there was a requirement after you printed your ballot at the machine, you had to go to and put that ballot in one box and tear off a tab and put another box. Right. Williamson County and Hamilton County were the only two counties that had that system, and it was kind of a leftover when ballots were pre-printed. Working with Chad Gray and the Secretary of State, what we did, we changed that where that is just the one paper ballot that you put in the box instead of the process. And some people were getting confused. It was delaying the process. So this way we can get people in and out of the ballot the voting location quicker without any confusion.
The one more subject I want to try to talk about just a little bit before we run out of time here, but there's the governor has changed his position on sharing the coronavirus data with first responders. In other words, who has coronavirus, who might not have it. And he first had directed the state to share those names with the first responders. And now he's changed his position on that. That you could take that either way, and I understand that. But what is behind this? Jack, you're on the got the governor's ear, but why did he change his position on that?
Well, I think there was fairly significant pushback from the public at large about having that information shared. And I think rightfully so. I was disturbed when I found out that that was happening. Now, in the governor's defense, that's actually a process that's been in place for many, many years. And there are reasons I can't effectively articulate why that has been done in the past with different types of diseases and contagions and things of that nature. But it was very limited and not as widespread as what we've experienced here with COVID-19. So I think the governor made the right decision, and I applaud him for doing that. I think he was counseled or got counsel about doing it in the first place because of precedent and the fact that it had been done previously. But I think he heard loud and clear, and after evaluating it, figured out that it's really not necessary now. And it made people uncomfortable having that information out there being shared. So I think it was the right decision.
Brandon, your friends in the law enforcement community, are they okay with that decision?
I don't know that I can speak for the law enforcement community at this point about that decision. I know the governor was doing his best to support his first responders. And with that, he made some decisions that made some people real uncomfortable. He's backed up on that and changed course. And I don't know. It's hard to be governor sometimes. And I don't sit back and criticize everything the governor does, nor do I think it, that's not the job I was really elected to do, is weigh in on every decision the governor makes. He does a fantastic job 99% of the time. And sometimes when I disagree, I just tend to hold my tongue because I don't know that that's my place. But I know he has the best interest of Tennesseans at heart always. He has to make some hard decisions.
Sam, are the veterans
You breaking up?
okay with that?
Yes.
I said, are the veterans okay with that?
Yes, and again, Jack hit on it. It was established for those diseases that could be transmitted, and what they really should do is to approach every individual as if they have the COVID virus. But in the original intent, my understanding, and I'm glad they changed it, but the original intent was to preserve our force out there, that we do not lose our first responders and have them stand down for 14 days. But again, I think they approach every individual as if they have COVID-19. And again, there's no reason to have the reporting process that the governor rescinded.
Well, it looks like we're out of time. Really appreciate you gentlemen for taking the time to be with us this morning. Give us some insights from behind the scenes on all these things that are going on, quite unprecedented times, as you pointed out, Jack. And we just appreciate the efforts that you all are going to protect us, take care of us, and try to make sure the state government keeps going. Want to thank Creed Henderson and the WCTV staff for making us look good every month. Tom Lawrence, thanks again for the WAKM crew putting us on there. Vanderbilt and AT&T for a financial contribution to help pay the overhead, and chamber staff, Matt Largen, Kel McDowell, Griffin, and Nancy, so thankful for all you do for us. And then looking forward back to Community Coffee in Columbia State, hosting us back at Columbia State here in a couple of months. But for the time being, we will continue on Zoom, and look forward to seeing you back here next month on the final Friday of June, and give us an update at that time. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Good to see you guys.